Okay, great. So, welcome everybody to the cloud-based solutions for nonprofits. And while they're so critical, an argument could be made that as cloud-based solutions came along when they did, they were always a great idea. And COVID has made them an even better idea and more critical or even essential to continuing business operations, as we know. And so this workshop comes out of the suggestion of nonprofits lead program participants like you all, just people who write in what they need on the program evaluations and say, please, could you develop a program on this? And so, as Andrea is going to explain, there are lots of different cloud-based solutions for different aspects of your nonprofit. And so we're going to do kind of a wide brush stroke today. And we're always willing to listen if you have questions or you need us to get more specific into one area. Remember, we've got the Nonprofit Leader Roundtable where we can have specific discussions. We have great speakers like Andrea that are willing to take your questions offline and online here today. And then there, you can always let me know that we need a program built around something. And so I want to welcome you to Cloud-Based Solutions. Welcome, Andrea. We're happy to have you back. We love your workshops. And
Thank you.
Let's get started.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And thanks for those of you who made the time to come live. I think these workshops are better if we can watch them live and ask questions in real time. I think it is more effective. But to those who are watching the recording, please know that at the end of the workshop, we'll be sure that you know how to get in touch with me if you have questions after you've watched the recording as well. So as Amy said, we're here to talk about cloud-based solutions, and I just want to give you some affirmation in case you're wondering if you're in the right place. So if you're in the right place, if you're confused about all of the tools that are out there to help you work from home or to work from someplace other than your primary office that you're used to going to. Or you are still in the right place if you have trouble learning new technology, but you know it's important and necessary, which is key for us to get in that spot as well. Maybe you're just not sure which digital tools you actually need. There are a lot of people out there selling tools that may or may not be appropriate for your nonprofit. And so it's important to know how to assess what you actually need. And we're going to talk about well, I'll say that for in a second. Or if you just want to use this time to equip your nonprofit to respond better if there's a next time. And guess what? There's probably going to be a next time. I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but I can't imagine this will be the only time that we're faced with a challenge like this where we can't physically be in the space we need to be in with all of our people. So if any of those ring true for you, I hope that you'll kind of settle in for the next hour and that I'll give you some information that equips you. So just to kind of tackle what we're going to learn today, I'm going to start by just defining what we actually mean by cloud-based solutions and how to identify which ones of those that you might need. We're also going to talk about the most important factors in determining which solutions are right for you. So again, before we kind of focus on the tools themselves, how to know which ones we need to even really sort through. And then how to get over your fear of technology and learn something new without the overwhelm, because let's face it, we're all overwhelmed with all of the things outside of this topic area. So we don't want this to add to that. So who am I? I am your host today. I'm Andrea Shirey. I'm the owner of OneNine Design. I've been in business since 2017. My perspective is one of a former nonprofit executive director. I've also been a fundraiser, both in grassroots nonprofits as well as higher education. I've been a grant writer, a major gifts officer, and pretty much every role in between. So that is the perspective that I come to you from. And essentially, I help nonprofits use the right digital marketing tools to grow their reach and make a bigger impact without breaking the budget. And that is the mission of my business. So with that out of the way, let's dive in. And let's talk about, what does cloud-based even mean, right? Sometimes I think that term can be confusing, and I do see, especially in the nonprofit space, people are a little reluctant to kind of step up and ask those kind of questions. So no embarrassment at all if you're not quite certain how we define some of these things. In a very, very basic definition, cloud-based just means an internet-based application or service. So if you think about traditional software or programs, that application is typically located on your actual computer, and your computer is doing the work to run that program. A cloud-based software is different because the computing is happening somewhere across the country in a data center outside of your organization, and you're just seeing the results of that work on your own screen. So typically that means we're accessing that program through a web browser, meaning that we can access it from anywhere, both within our offices and while we're at home or in another location. And so this isn't foreign to us. A lot of times we're using anytime you have a login to some kind of program and you're going online to log in, you've been using a cloud-based solution. We are just at the point now where we have to look more at more and more of those solutions, and maybe move more of our nonprofit operations online than we have before. So examples that you've probably already heard of and have been using would be anything in the Google suite. And if you've been with us in Nonprofits Lead for a while, we did an entire workshop all about using Google tools. Gosh, I don't know when that was. That feels like forever ago. Maybe that was just in the spring. I think that was maybe back in May. But Google Drive and all of its applications like Google Docs, Google Sheets, Google Slides, even Gmail itself, if you use Gmail, that is a cloud-based email solution. We don't think of it like that. We just think of it as email, but that is obviously an example you've probably heard of. If any of you have ever used Dropbox, that's a cloud-based file storing solution where we upload files to the internet. We can share access with certain people, and we can access those files from anywhere. That is a do or die for me in my business. I use Dropbox just about every single day. Office 365 is also a cloud-based solution, and I know a couple of my clients have moved over to this in 2020, and I'm just starting to really learn all that it's capable of doing. That, man, is a robust program. And so you're talking about your full suite of Office products that we know, things like Word and Excel and PowerPoint that you might be familiar with, but also some really great organization documents, organizational tools like for to-do list management. I'm learning more and more through a couple of my clients that are using this, how robust that program is. And then obviously what we're using now, Zoom, is a cloud-based solution. This is a tool where we can do video conferencing and video meetings from anywhere. And then Microsoft's version of that is Teams. So if you weren't sure what cloud-based really meant, this should kind of help click it all together, and that you're probably already using some of these solutions. We're just going to talk about if you're not, how to get you started, and then how to figure out if you are using some of these, which ones do you really need to add to your plate. So for anybody on the call, are you using any of these right now, other than obviously we're all using Zoom, but maybe tell us which ones you're already using. That would help us kind of be able to see that. And while you guys kind of talk about that, and Amy's going to kind of manage the chat for me, so we'll come back to those answers in just a second. But let's talk for a second about the advantages, and yes, there are some disadvantages of cloud-based solutions. So our first advantage is, might seem a little, I guess, inconspicuous, is that we have a less need for higher end computers. If you've ever had to buy new computers for your nonprofit, that is a huge expense. Not only just buying the hardware itself, but buying the software, doing computer upgrades. I've been in many nonprofit offices that have such outdated equipment because their budgets really just couldn't sustain new computers. So when you're using more and more cloud-based solutions, again, remember those solutions are being run on someone else's computer, and you're just simply accessing them via the internet. So you have a less need for higher end computers, and wouldn't need to upgrade them as often. You could also honestly be looking at more iPads or Microsoft Surface tablets as an option instead of a computer, because if you're running the majority of your programs through cloud-based solutions, those devices are going to be just as easy for you to use as a traditional computer would be. And obviously they would be much more portable. The second advantage would be eliminating the need for a software upgrade. So not only are we, as nonprofits investing in that hardware, but if we have, let's say, a really old version of Microsoft Office, and we are continually interacting with people who are using a higher version than us, that can become problematic. And so when we're using the online solutions, we eliminate all of that headache with conversions and then with having to upgrade that software. And the great thing about the cloud-based software is typically if they implement upgrades, that just happens automatically for all of the users, and you don't have to worry about any of those headaches. And then the last advantage I'll point out is just the continuity of service. And that's probably really why you guys are here. So when a situation arises that is preventing you or your team from physically being at your office computer or the place that you typically work, you're still going to be able to access the programs you need and do that work from a remote location. And that continuity of service can continue. So those are some of the advantages of cloud-based solutions. There are probably a lot more we could add to this list, but those are kind of the top three that came to mind. With that in mind, though, there are a couple of drawbacks to consider and to understand when you go into this, because it's not a perfect system. The first thing you're going to hear people talk about is security, and security must become a priority. Now, cloud-based solutions sometimes do get a bad reputation for poor security. Everyone kind of immediately panics thinking all of their information is just floating out there in internet space. But keep in mind, typically we don't have perfect security in our offices either. If I did a random audit of your office space, I wonder if I would find a desk where I could sit down and log on without a password, or if I could find a space that had files sitting on the desk that weren't in a locked drawer all of the time. So we're not technically going from a completely secure environment to a non-secure environment. As a matter of fact, because there is so much security at play with cloud-based solutions, you also typically have dedicated team members from those companies to help you mitigate those risks and handle them. And that is definitely, we can almost put that back in the advantage column, that these companies are well aware of the security issues and they're always proactively working towards that. No company wants to be the company that has to email its users and say, I'm sorry, we've had a data breach. Another drawback of a cloud-based solution would be that you have less control. So if you're relying on a company to provide software, let's say it's a financial software, and that company suddenly goes out of business or does have some kind of catastrophe with data, they may lock that software down and you wouldn't be able to access it. And so that is a drawback. I would say that's pretty unlikely to happen. And the way that we can mitigate that risk is doing a lot of advanced research and preparation, so that we know when we're choosing our cloud-based solution provider, we've done our research. How long has this company been around? What kind of security do they have in place? And how prepared are they to handle a situation like that? And then probably the biggest drawback that I think many of us in West Virginia have seen become, and even Ohio, have become an issue is the fact that you are at the mercy of a strong internet connection. When you are relying on cloud-based solutions, that means you are accessing it via the internet. Now, I live in Vienna, West Virginia, just outside, and our internet here, we have the highest package available from our provider, and we still struggle with the consistent connection during the work hours, because so many people are online working from home right now. And so we have to give really priority to thinking that through, not only for our executive directors, but maybe for staff. So if you're expecting a staff member to be active online for your nonprofit throughout the day, are they located in a place where they can do that? And unfortunately, even though there are a lot of people working on that in our state and in the Appalachia region, that is still an issue for us in the rural parts of our communities. So that would definitely be one of the drawbacks there. So understanding that there are advantages and disadvantages is important. But let's move on to something I mentioned when we first started, which was how to avoid kind of jumping into the solution too early. Because what has happened, especially here in 2020, as this has become front and center, not only for corporations, but obviously for our nonprofit community, we're getting these tools kind of just everywhere. We're seeing solutions for everything at every turn. And this kind of goes hand in hand. If you haven't watched the workshop we did last month on evaluating offers, I would definitely recommend that you contact Nonprofits Lead and watch that, because this kind of goes hand in hand with that subject, how we talked about how to evaluate an offer that you receive in your inbox or via phone, and make sure that that's the right offer for your nonprofit. Because right now you are getting offers for digital tools for cloud-based solutions that you may or may not need, and they sound great. Even I, as a business owner, have gotten all kinds of offers and thinking, oh wow, that's really cool. And then I really have to tell myself, but you don't really need that. You're not even really doing that work. A good example here would be the online auction and online sort of virtual event gala software. Those ads are everywhere. Those companies have exploded. And for some large scale nonprofits who have relied on event revenue, for a big part of their budget, those probably are really viable tools. But for many of our smaller nonprofits, you're probably talking about a higher investment in a tool than you would have had as a profit from that in-person event. Plus, that doesn't even really consider how much time it would take to implement the software, learn the software, get your volunteers, all of those kind of things. So that's a good example of how it might be a great tool, but it may not be a great tool for you. So what I recommend before you dive into specific cloud-based tools is that you look at your processes and your workflow. Really think through the workflow of your nonprofit, your day-to-day routines and activities, and go through that list and say, what do you usually do that you cannot yet do remotely? What are the things that you're like, oh gosh, I never even thought about this. I will tell you, for one of our nonprofits here locally, it was thank you letters. They could see donations coming in. Thankfully, they had an online donation system, but they had this really defined workflow. If they saw the gift come in, so-and-so in the office then printed the report of the gifts, and then someone else generated the thank you letters and put them in the mail. Well, that involved, obviously passing those reports back and forth, and it involved a printer, a really simple thing that particular staff member didn't have access to at their home. And so that's an example of looking at your workflow and identifying which step of the process is it that's really tripping you up. If there are lots of things on that list that are becoming an obstacle remotely, you might need to kind of start to prioritize those. So which one of those could you probably handle manually and it not be that much of an issue? Could one person go into the office at a time, handle that task with no one else in the office, for example? That's what this particular nonprofit did. They identified one staff member who, every other day would go into the office, print the letters, get them in the mail. They were the only person in the office. There was no exposure. And that kind of solved it for them temporarily. So if you have a list of processes or workflows, and you can identify the ones that are you really need to take online for continuity, start to prioritize those. And then once you have those tasks at hand, you can start to ask a few more questions. Do you have the budget for new tools? This is not the time to go all in on big fancy digital tools when budgets are already under a crunch, but you also have to balance that with your operational needs. And you should be communicating with your board of directors to say, listen, either maybe we did not have this in the budget, we understand, but without this option, we cannot do, X, Y, and Z. Or if you did have it in the budget, you might just need to look and see, okay, where is this going to save us some money? Are we going to save, on, these categories over here because we have this new tool? So there's some evaluation that needs to be done there. You also have to have time to learn those new tools and to get the support that you need. And I think that's an important one to factor in, as so many of you are under the gun right now to raise money. It may not make a lot of sense. For example, let's say you had a big end of the year event scheduled. It may make a lot more sense for you to pick up the phone and do individual giving asks of your consistent donors versus pushing a bunch of money into a software system to run an online event. You really have to evaluate these two options and think about where your greatest return is going to be. Is that making sense to everyone? As we instead of diving into specific product, we are going to talk about some specific products, but before we get that far, I wanted to introduce this concept to you of really kind of looking at your workflow and assessing what it is you actually need. So we have what I've kind of narrowed down to 4 different categories of cloud-based solutions. And so I want to just go through these one by one and talk about some options within them. And then obviously, if you guys have questions about these categories or want to talk about other specific products that are out there, we can do that. I was telling Amy before we started recording, I had maybe some more detail in this presentation about a week ago. And as I started thinking about it, we could really we could be here all day talking about all of the actual tool options that are out there. And the fact is, those tools are, to find the right tool, we really have to know a lot about your nonprofit, how big your staff is, what your budget is, what your needs are, how many donors you have. And so we don't want to get too bogged down in the specifics, but I want to give you some categories of things that you can think about. So let's look first then here at some finance solutions. So taking your finance or accounting online is one of those things that, again, immediately we have some reservation about security. We start talking about donor identification, actual giving amounts, and we may have some fears there about how online do we want that solution to be? And so again, that is a conversation between you and your board to talk about the security measures that would be needed, what's appropriate for your organization. Now, you might already be using something online. I know I saw a survey here not too long ago in a Facebook group that I'm active in, and I think about almost 40% of them had some kind of online accounting system. So this may be one of the more no-brainers, if you will. But we also have a range, I think, in the areas that we serve, and that we have some people that are still kind of managing this in Excel or maybe Google Sheets, and that there's nothing wrong with that. A smaller scale nonprofit might be doing that versus some of our bigger nonprofits that are using more robust tools. A couple of examples to mention here, first of all, would be QuickBooks. I think that's a really popular accounting solution for nonprofits. And QuickBooks has a great component because you can both utilize the desktop version of their program and have access to it online with certain subscription packages. So if you're using QuickBooks and you're not aware of that, I would recommend that you talk to them or get on their website and look at exactly what your plan includes, because I know that that is a popular feature for that program. And there's a lot of benefits to be able, obviously, to being able to do that. Another one that's gaining popularity in both the small business category and nonprofits is called Wave. And the address is actually Wave Apps, APPS. I think it's waveapps.com, and Wave is completely online solution, but it's free. Like, like literally free. Now it has a couple of drawbacks. There's a little less robustness than when you compare it to QuickBooks, but I actually use this for my small business and I love it. So if you're going from something of more like a homegrown manual system and you don't need like the full blown QuickBooks subscription, Wave might be an option for you. One drawback there is they do not have an app. I'm a big app girl. I like to be able to look at things on my phone, and that's not yet a feature that they have. Zero is another growing option, again, crossover between business and nonprofits, and they have a pretty fluid payment spectrum where they do have some really low end subscription costs with limited features. And then I think their most expensive package, if I'm remembering correctly, is less than $60 a month. So that might be, again, another in-between solution. And then, last but not least here in finance, if you're using Excel, you could consider moving that to Google Sheets, which is going to let you access that from anywhere. Whereas traditionally Microsoft Excel was going to live as a program on your computer, unless you have Microsoft Office 365, in which case that would take that online. Google Sheets would be a free option here. So that's a quick look at sort of online finance and accounting. Again, you want to be very, very careful about security when we're talking about this. You want to make sure that you're limiting staff access to these online solutions to staff members that you trust, staff members that have been identified, as contacts for this area of your nonprofit. And if you're going to be moving to a model like this, would it be a bad idea to consult either the auditing firm that you use every year or your local accounting firms, just to get their take on that as well. So are there any questions about the finance options?
Andrea, for those people who are looking to acquire new software that you mentioned, after today, they should not go directly to the, like office365.com or something first, right? They should go to TechSoup and see.
Yes.
Okay. Will you
Yes, I have.
If there's anybody because I think my first thing is I would Google it and I would go right to there and see how much it costs and go to my board. And there's a better way to do that, right? So would you?
Absolutely. Yes. I probably should have moved that slide up because I think I have that at the end. But yes, at the end, we're going to talk about what TechSoup is, how that works, and how most of these software programs you can save, more than 50, 60, 70% as a nonprofit if you go through the right channels. It's a little more legwork, but it's absolutely worth it at the end. So thank you for pointing that out. So yes, jot down the names of anything that sounds interesting or applicable to your nonprofit, but before you kind of, start looking at pricing, we will talk about that. So thank you for reminding us of that. So let's move on to communications and collaboration. And this is probably the most popular segment of cloud-based solutions right now, because as nonprofits, we're finding ourselves isolated from our staff members, from our volunteers, from our boards. And I don't know about any of you, but I'm getting very worn out from my email inbox. I feel like I'm panicked about missing things because I'm getting so many messages. And with everyone just kind of stepping up the email communications, it's getting harder and harder to manage. So I think it's important that we make sure your nonprofit is equipped with some kind of system that will help you have smooth communications and still be collaborating about the work that you're doing. We know that nonprofits traditionally are smaller staffs and we have more volunteers involved. And when we're meeting up in the building once or twice a week, that's much less of an issue than it might be right now. So again, the first thing I would point back to is the workshop that we did on using Google-based applications, because in that workshop, we dive into every Google app product that there was. I think we talked about Docs, we talked about Sheets, we talked about Google Drive, and I think even Google Slides. So if you haven't watched that, let us know and we can get you. Amy, I guess I should have checked with you first. I'm pretty sure that one was recorded, but I might be misremembering that. So
it is
maybe
recorded.
we can circle back
That
to that at the
recording
end.
is still available. Yeah, if anybody here needs that, we'd be happy to share it.
Okay, great. So we have that whole Google Apps suite. So we'll talk about that in a second. Then again, we had Office 365, which again is just your Microsoft Office suite of products that you know and love, and most of you use, but it's all cloud-based. And I think that is a great investment for anybody to make, because those are the most widely and you're not going to have any compatibility issues with anybody else who, even people like me who are Mac users, can access those Office 365 documents as well. And then you have some of the ones that you may not have heard of, but you might be interested in. Most of these are have a free version or a low cost version. So the first two are kind of in the same category, Trello and Asana. Both of these products are kind of workflow based applications help you manage projects essentially. So while they're often marketed towards creatives or small businesses like myself, I have come across many nonprofits that are using them. So for example, if you're running an event, and I'm second guessing myself, I should have put some screenshots of them in here, but if you're running an event, Trello or Asana would be a great way to assign different tasks to different team members and then be able to check in and see if those tasks were completed or not. You could assign them to a different person. You can leave each other notes and things like that. So those are really great project management tools that can be adapted easily to nonprofits, even though, again, they're typically marketed to small businesses. Now, Dubsado is kind of an outlier in that there's a little bit of project management in that, but that is more, it is more kind of a client based. So I am familiar with some nonprofits who use that when they work with individual clients to move them through, say, like a workflow process. And I think it's catching on in the nonprofit community, but probably would be more appropriate for a nonprofit that's more based on serving individuals and not groups of people, if that makes sense. There are several options like DocuSign, where if you have to get things signed online or need multiple signatures on documents that you would normally take to a board meeting in person or have your board chair stop by and sign. I like DocuSign. There's also a program called HelloSign. And so those are great programs to have access to if your nonprofit is routinely having to get signatures on things and that you're finding that difficult to do right now. And then the last one in communication and collaboration would be, again, Zoom or Teams. Don't discount that, even if you're not doing something like a webinar or a workshop. Maybe you just need to have a once a week team meeting with your staff or your volunteers. We kind of joked about it, in March and April, we were all kind of like trying to figure all that stuff out. And now we're pretty much pros at it. So most people are pretty accustomed to getting a Zoom link in their inbox and jumping on. You can do, if it's a one-on-one meeting, you don't have to pay for Zoom. Or if you have multiple people, you're just limited to 1 hour. But even that, you can just keep your meetings nice and brief. But don't discount that to get your board together, your executive committees. You can equip different committees for your board, suggest that to your committee chairs. And definitely take advantage of being able to kind of see people on the screen and have a little bit of eye contact. I know it takes a little additional work, but I definitely think it can benefit our nonprofits. I want to double back.
I want to second that. I'm sorry to jump in, but I want to second that.
Oh, you're fine.
From, and I see, of course, my internet connection is unstable just as I talk. So if it gets a little wobbly, I'm here. But two things is, one is that I think there were some people that thought, because we didn't know what to expect, that we just hold off. I had organizations just say, we just won't have board meetings this summer. It's okay. We don't need to go virtual. And time has told us that it's taking long enough now, and that people are like you said, are becoming more accustomed to it, and other organizations or other people, donors even, want to do Zoom meetings and want to stay in touch with us virtually. That if there's anybody listening right now, as they say, who was one of those that said, "Oh, we don't need to do it because we can just take a few months off and we can just email each other, and we don't need to see each other face to face, or we don't need to implement board meetings this way right now." I think that I would ask them to reconsider, because it's time. And
Yeah,
the other piece that I was going to add to that is that, and so because we've had this time, there has been some research done, and even if it's just like you mentioned, like the little one-on-one staff meeting, just touching base with people, just asking them how they're doing, and again, I want to bring up donors, but our board and our staff, and even our other colleagues, that it's the research that's been done is showing that's extremely beneficial. So do it.
yeah, absolutely. I think Amy's exactly right in that many were kind of like, this is going to be over. The summer's a slow time anyway, but guys, here we are in November with really disturbing trends in the news, and this is the time to touch base, especially before the holidays really kick in, and you traditionally might be taking a break anyway. Don't forget about donors. I didn't really incorporate that aspect a lot into this presentation, but don't forget about the power of a simple FaceTime call. I mean, and somebody asked me about the protocol about that the other day. What I recommend with some of your more consistent donors is send them a quick text message and just say, could I have a FaceTime call with you this week, just to check in quickly? I mean, you don't want to spring that on somebody, especially right now as everybody's working from home. You don't know what you're going to see. But check in with them, or send them a quick email and say, hey, can we just do a quick FaceTime call? Because that, and now of course, I'm assuming everyone's Apple users. I know Android, that becomes a little more difficult, but the point here is, don't forget the donors, and don't overcomplicate it. You don't have to schedule an entire webinar for your team. It can be a very impromptu, hey guys, let's all jump on at Zoom at 9:00 in the morning, get your coffee, and let's just have a chat, right? Let's just see how everybody's doing. So I think that goes a long way in employee morale, and just reminding people that the work of your nonprofit cannot stop just because the world is a little bit upside down right now. So kind of communications and collaborations, you've got completely free options on one end with the Google App Suite. Again, all you need to use Google Tools is a Gmail email address, which is free. Once you get logged into your Gmail account, you'll see a little grid up in the top right-hand corner of your screen. That is where all of the Google apps are located. Docs, is great for sharing a document with somebody else and being able to do really real-time collaboration on something. And then a paid option, again, being Office 365 and the full suite of Office products there. So, so that kind of covers communication and collaboration. I want to touch briefly here on file storage and remote printing. And honestly, printing just is kind of one of those things that it wasn't really on my radar until I talked to that client who was kind of struggling with sending thank you letters. So file storage is important, because how many times in the last, 6 or 7 months have you gone to open a document and realized, oh, I don't have that, it's on my computer at work? Or if you're trying to manage using like a little thumb drive that you're carrying around everywhere. So I definitely recommend looking, again, free option is going to be Google Drive. There are some storage limits there, but unless you're storing really, really massive photo libraries or really large documents, storage should not be too much of an issue there for you. You can choose who has access to certain drives. So the drive is kind of the overarching theme here. And then inside of that, you can have folders. So you can share access at the folder level, or you can even share access at the document level. So it's a very robust tool, great for board management. I always recommend nonprofits to have a board folder on Google Drive where you can share your meeting agendas or past meeting minutes, documents you need them to review. And then you just have to send a link to the drive. You don't have to be attaching all of the files to email all the time. So great tool in Google Drive. Dropbox and Box, not to be confused with one another. They're both online file storage tools. I think both of them have a free plan. Depending on the level, again, storage and access that you need, there are going to be ways to upgrade that as well. I like Dropbox because I have Dropbox app on my phone. And if I'm going to a meeting, I can throw it in Dropbox on the computer, and then I can open it easily on my phone. I can do the same thing with Google Drive. I think the interface with Dropbox is a little more easy to use for that use case, but both of those are great options. And then in terms of printing, depending on where you are, I know not everybody in this workshop is going to be local, but I know here in the Parkersburg, Vienna area, Office Depot has great remote printing options, and they will often give your nonprofit a discount. You can show your tax ID card and make sure you're not paying taxes. But if you need to print things there, you can upload those online very easily, then pick them up at your local store. And then you could also check with your local printing companies because they're hurting for business right now. A lot of people rely on local printing companies for events and different things, and a lot of them are hurting for business right now. So if you have some things you need printed, check with somebody like that who might not first come to mind, and they may be able to help you in that case as well. There are a couple of services online where you can do like access your printer at your office. And I just personally find that to be a little bit cumbersome. I think there are easier ways to get around that. And that would involve what I would consider a pretty high tech level to be able to kind of tap into your printer from another location. It's not impossible, but most people, if you have just a normal printer, that's going to take some work to set that up to access it remotely. So, this isn't a huge obstacle for a lot of people, but it is something to consider if you or your staff members do not have access to printing at home. And then last but not least in our categories are our donor data. And this is interesting to me because the last survey that I looked at, I think it was done out of Southern West Virginia. And I'm not sure how big their sample size was, but the majority of our nonprofits did not have an actual, what I would quote unquote, real donor database. And so, Amy, I feel like this might be a topic to come back to at some point because there are endless advantages to having an actual donor database. And what I mean by that is like something other than an Excel spreadsheet or your own kind of homegrown system. I mean, a software, a cloud-based solution that is designed to hold your data, that you can export data into different reports, whether that be from giving or activity. You can record details about conversations with them, where they are on your donor continuum. You can customize letters to them based on, past gift history, those kind of things. That's what I mean by kind of a quote unquote real database. The couple of my favorite sort of entry level databases are here on the screen. Little Green Light is really growing in popularity among smaller nonprofits. I did a demo call with them a few months ago to learn more about them. I was really impressed by their focus to serve the smaller nonprofit. Classy is another one that has gotten a lot of press recently because they have some really great online event tools that come along with their donor database. So I think that has really helped their popularity. They also help you manage online giving that directly integrates with your database. And then Donor Perfect is a little more robust product. Again, a lot of advantages there in terms of integration. So obviously the advantage to having a donor database that's cloud-based is that you're sitting at home and you have all of your donors' contact information that's not sitting in a file folder on your desk or on a report that you've printed out. You could pick up the phone and be doing thank you calls or solicitation calls. You could be writing letters at home or thank you cards. So being able to access that information online is really important. I would highlight again here, security is really, really important when we talk about donor databases. So to be sure that as you're exploring those products, you're giving a lot of attention to their security methods. So whew, I feel like I've said a lot of words. We're going to wrap up here and then have time for a few questions. As Amy very helpfully mentioned earlier, the first step, if you think there is a new program that you would like to take advantage of, go to TechSoup.org. If you're not familiar with this process, essentially it is a partnership with Microsoft. You will create an account for your nonprofit, and which takes some verification. It's not immediate. I think a couple of days. I've never heard of it taking more than that. But you're going to verify your nonprofit status, and this essentially gets you access to all kinds of very, very steep discounts on software of all ranges. I mean, anything you could think of is pretty much in there. TechSoup itself is a great organization as well. They have a blog on their website that's really helpful. You can ask them questions. They have a chat feature. And so there are a lot of resources there, even to help you learn technology once you get the software. They have skill classes and workshops and things like that. So TechSoup should be your first stop if you are thinking about purchasing a piece of software. The other website that is the overwhelm is a site called Capterra. And Capterra essentially is a rating system for software. And so they, any kind of category you have in mind, you can sort by category, you can sort by price level, features, and they're going to narrow down and give you an objective review of the top software programs in that category. So I'm always double checking when people ask me for ideas for different things. I always go to Capterra and just kind of see what their team has to say about that. And then maybe a little less obvious, but still I would like to say that is very, very helpful, is that you need to ask people that you trust. So we all trust Amy Elliott. We all trust the team and Nonprofits Lead, because she's working with so many different nonprofits. She's probably talked to somebody who has something in that category that can at least give you a personal example of something that has been used. I also like to give just a plug to United Way Alliance at the same time, because again, their exposure with the nonprofit community, their hands are in it every single day, and their folks talk to one another. They have quarterly meetings. And so if you want to ask a question of what the majority of them are using, I think they're a great go-to resource. Obviously myself, I'm always willing to help point you in the right direction, things that I've heard of, things that I know people have used, or at least help you think through a decision that you're about to make. What we don't want you to do is jump in to a really expensive product that might not ultimately meet your needs. So before you commit to anything, we'll assume that you've gone to TechSoup and kind of gotten the best price. You've talked to people you trust. Take advantage of trial periods. A lot of these software programs do offer demos. Those can get a little bit cumbersome, because typically if you sign up for a demo, you're going to subject yourself to a sales pitch. Just know that going in and just kind of accept that. But see if you can try the product out for 90 days and see if it actually works for your nonprofit. Don't forget to ask questions around security and access, and also about your data itself. So for example, a donor database that's online, you want to make sure that for example, if you were to switch products down the road, that you could get all of your data back, that you still own it, that they're not going to share it with anybody. There's a lot of questions to ask around there. This is where it would be nice to seek out someone that you trust to review the purchase agreements before you sign them, especially if you have a board member that is familiar with that, or that's their expertise. And talk to your staff. A quick antidote here is that I know a nonprofit that went all in on volunteer software without talking really to their volunteer coordinators or their lead volunteers who didn't want to use the system. And so they were used to an old school system. Everyone kind of knew they needed to go electronic, but knowing something and doing it are two different things. And so just make sure you have the buy-in of the people that the product is going to serve before you're all in, so to speak. And again, try to avoid being overwhelmed by this process. Choose one area at a time. Don't try to take your entire nonprofit to the cloud at one time. Pick one of those category areas, get comfortable with it, get a new workflow in place, and then move on to the next. It's not going to be something that we can solve overnight. If you start to get overwhelmed by the process, just keep in mind your end goal and how the benefits of being able to have a system like this, what that's going to bring to your nonprofit, which we hope ultimately means you're going to be consistently delivering your programs and services, and you're going to have the funding to do that. And then I always say this: identify the fear and name it, because sometimes we think we're overwhelmed, or we think we're scared of technology, and really, maybe more specifically, we're afraid to admit that we didn't know a certain thing, or we didn't think about this piece over there, which in and of itself isn't that big of a deal. So kind of try to sort through what it is that's holding you back, just name it, and then find somebody to help you overcome that. So I hope that these tips have been helpful for you, that we've helped you think through the different categories of taking your nonprofit to your programs on the cloud, and that you'll have a place to start after watching this, and a way to identify what it is that you really need. Last but not least, be proactive once you do this. Keep good records of who has access to which programs, so that if you have turnover, or you're an organization that relies heavily on volunteers, it's okay to give volunteers access, but you need to have a system to keep track of that. And understand who controls that access. So if you're the executive director and you're the person that controls all of the login information, and you get COVID, who is next in line, right? So kind of think through that process, or any illness that would take you out of the equation, even temporarily. Make sure that you have the processes in place to manage that. And don't be afraid to ask for help. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, if you would like to talk through questions that you have with Amy or I offline, I know that we're both willing to help you with that. You can find me at oneninedesign.net. And where I have a free resource library for nonprofits that has all kinds of goodies in there. You can hop on my email list. If you just put email in front of that, email.oneninedesign.net will get you on a list where I regularly send free resources and information like I've presented today. So with that, I will give it back over to Amy.
Wow. That's a lot of information. Thank you so much. You see why we love it?
Yes.
So I'm going to go back into chat. I think Anne brought up OneDrive, which for file storage, when we were talking about Dropbox and Google, etc. I think that OneDrive is a good option for those who have it already as an option. And so Office 365 would be one to consider. That would be one to consider if they have that. So the things people are already using, and now we're going to plenty of time for questions, everyone, if you have questions. But so we have QuickBooks Online, Zoom,
good.
Basecamp, Dropbox. Here we have Zoom, Teams, Office 365. We have somebody said that, Ann said that Live Stories and Jamboard were a fail for us. But that she loves Basecamp because you can limit the notification pings and you can check it once a day to not miss anything and to not overwhelm your inbox. Plus, there's a phone app. So good,
Yeah.
good share there. Thank you, Ann. And yeah, and so I think I've covered what's in the chat. Speaking though of Office 365, a friend showed me at lunch last week. I have not had time to check this out. But Andrea, I'm wondering if you know about Planner that is in Outlook.
Yeah, I've just learned it myself in the last probably 6 weeks. I didn't know about it. I've used some of those other online, to-do list applications I was talking about, and I'm still, of all of the technology I use, I'm still a paper planner girl. So for to-do lists and things like that, but Planner seems fantastic. And I think if you don't have Office 365, that might be one of the biggest reasons to explore that right now. I'll let you kind of tell them about it, but I've just learned about it myself.
No, I haven't learned much other than
Oh.
my friend saying, hey, do you know about Planner, and showing me like on her phone. But I guess if you have Office 365 or if you have Microsoft Outlook, it's already in there, right? So you already have it. You
Yes.
just don't know it. There's a planner tool up in, in your, would that be probably upper left-hand corner in your menu bar, probably.
Yeah, in the menu.
So that's really all I know. I'm going to make a note
Uh-oh.
calendar to explore it a little further.
Yeah, I mean, and for just so to give a little more context there, essentially it is a to-do list feature of Outlook, but that you can collaborate with. So you can enter tasks for yourself to do, or you can assign them to other people on your team. So if everybody in your office is using Outlook, then you can, you can have them go in and you can assign a task to them, and then they could even mark the progress that they've made on the task. So if it's something that maybe take them a week and they're halfway done, they can mark it as halfway done. So you as the manager could go in and say, oh, okay, Sarah's working on this. Amy hasn't started on that. Oh, Amy's done. Now I need to assign the next piece to this person over here. So it definitely would be more useful for somebody with probably, I would say, at least 3 or more team members. It could work with a 2-person staff, although it might be more set up than it's worth. But definitely if you're using Microsoft Outlook, go ahead and take a look at that tool and see if that's something that might work for your team. I think it's a great segue into what looks to be something that might be here to stay for a while.
Thank you. Okay, what questions or comments, other helpful tidbits does anybody have? While you're thinking of them, I just wanted to I reiterate, really, Andrea hit on it, but I wanted to reiterate boy, did we learn a lesson in business continuity and business continuity planning when COVID hit. And so these tools allow life to go on, right? Business to go on, with the work, right? The mission to go on. The other thing I think about is like the sustainability and the succession planning, so having a record so often, and I remember we're a small shop too over here, having a record of the way we do things, or where we put the files, or who has access to what, or what the passwords are, really all that goes into making life easier in general for the nonprofit as we move forward, making it beyond us. And I think these cloud-based tools help us do that. They help things be more accessible and more sustainable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Peggy put in the chat that this is very eye-opening on all the research.
Good.
Yeah. Anne has asked if you can address using a server for the agency.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that is definitely an option. So, a server essentially is just a computer, but it would be a dedicated computer that would run all of the programs. So, if you were going to use a local server for just your nonprofit, you would then also have to have software in place to access that server. So, what comes to mind, there is an online tool called Log Me In, where that will let you remotely access that specific computer and everyone could access it. So that is certainly an option. I feel like with the prevalence of so many online tools that it has really kind of taken, that almost becomes an old school approach, if you will. There's also some risk involved in that as well. So let's say the power goes out at your office, then you're not going to be accessing that server. You're still relying on an actual computer in the office in that situation versus relying on something that's going to live in the cloud. So it becomes a little more probably past my IT knowledge of all of the ins and outs of that, but it would be something to talk about if you have a local IT firm like BizTech here locally that helps you kind of manage your IT needs. That would be something to discuss with them. But essentially the idea there is, again, you're still having to log in and access an actual computer. Is that better than having no access at all? Of course, but it's going to present its own set of challenges as well.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that because I have a local small business friend who they relied on a server and then they had a fire.
Yeah.
So, now they do rely on the cloud. So I think anything that's physical or only in one spot is not the best sustainability and continuity planning. Like you said, it's better than having it on one individual's place where it's not accessible. Um, but I think that because there are so many free tools and with Google and Dropbox and different levels of those, that I think my recommendation would be to go to the cloud.
Right. And then just having all of those, once you have your solutions identified, and I don't know if I mentioned this or not, be sure that those solutions are documented. And so I recommend a Google Doc that's accessible to probably your entire, if not your entire board, at least maybe your executive committee and at least 2 or more staff members, that really documents your workflow in a remote workflow. So that might be the expectations. Here is how often we expect you to check your email from home. Here is where you access these specific files. This is how we're handling donor acknowledgements. All of those kind of things becomes a whole process to not only get the solutions in place, but then to make sure that you can sustain them and that they are consistent. Because at some point, right, this is going to end. Everyone's going to go back to some kind of normal process. And then if we should have something similar in the future, you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. You want to be able to go back to that protocol. You put the work in to establish, to say, okay, here's how we handled that before. Let's kick right back into that mode. And it might even, one of my clients said this has really brought up some possibilities for them to have a virtual assistant. They've always struggled with having an assistant in the office that was qualified, and all of a sudden they have all of these systems in place that they can bring in an assistant who lives outside the area and she can work remotely, and it just kind of opened a whole new world to them. So there are going to be some advantages to it if we can get those processes documented and working well.
Oh, I'm going to jump on that one too, because the organizations that were set up or did get set up soon after to do so were then able to use virtual volunteers, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so there were organizations that may have had this small local base of volunteers who may or may not have still been equipped or ready to volunteer during COVID, but were able then to tap into a much larger, worldwide in some cases. In one case I know of, literally worldwide volunteer base, or to go onto campuses or through campus networks and contact volunteers and potential volunteers and actually increased their volunteer base through this. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's just really it can eventually end up to put all of us in a much better situation if we can get past the overwhelm and get all of these kind of basics narrowed down and get the right suite of tools at our disposal. I think we're all going to grow from it. If I put on my rose-colored glasses.
looking for our silver linings.
That's right.
What other questions or comments, advice for the others? Anything does anyone else have? Hear that. So really appreciate that. Andrea, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you
Always.
for having me. Yes, you're very welcome.
Yep.
Good luck to everyone.